A couple weeks ago, I put out a comprehensive leak looking at Intel's Xeon products launching in 2024. And as far as I can tell, this video really flew under the radar for a lot of my viewers. And, well, I can only guess it's because it didn't have gamer all over the thumbnail. And I understand. A lot of gamers don't care about server. They don't think they need to care about server. And that one got pretty technical. But today I've got some updates to Intel's Granite Rapids and Sierra Forest that line up with some of the downgrades we've heard about Meteor Lake recently. And so this video is going to try to hook you gamers in. Please pay attention here as to what Intel's doing, not just with server, but seemingly now everything. It points to a shift in focus, a shift in strategy that is based around the necessity to only launch what they need to launch to stay afloat. Because this really is a seismic shift in how Intel conducts its business. This shows, what I'm about to leak, that they are truly realizing that they can't just keep spending money everywhere, and that it's going to come at the cost of cuts to a lot of their products, including products that gamers want in the future. Now, let me get to the key things that I'm leaking today first. So that's about Sierra Forest and Granite Rapids. Now, I recently leaked that there were 512 core and 344 core Sierra Forest designs. I'm told these are canceled, and they were canceled, by the way, as of a week ago. There'd be some people that said they were never coming out. Like, I knew people working on these day to day, so they certainly weren't canceled until recently. And the reason they're being canceled is a key customer to Intel is demanding that Sierra Forest launch by the end of Q2 2024 in high volume, or this customer is switching to AMD. And I'm not going to say who it is for obvious reasons, but this really is a key customer for Intel that spends millions, not a year, but per quarter on Intel, and Intel just cannot afford to lose this chunk of business in the server space. Furthermore, this customer is so reliable for Intel over the past few years that there is a worry that if this customer were to switch to AMD, a lot of Intel's other customers would go, oh, they're even switching to AMD? Oh my God, we have got to switch as well. And it could turn into a jumping off the sinking ship situation for Intel. So Intel can't let that happen. And they're going to make sure at least the model this customer wants of Sierra Forest is going to come out on time. And that is the 144 core SP model of Sierra Forest. And Intel is axing basically any other Sierra Forest designs that were working on tiles that aren't shared by this core model. And so, yeah, the main model is going to be 144 cores, and that's going to launch about a year from now, or be disastrous for Intel. And now the high core count model is not 512, it's not 344 core. It's just going to be 288 cores using two of the same tiles used in the main core model. And in fact, I'm told that Sierra Forest SP and Granite Rapids SP, the standard core count models, they share the same socket and the same I/O dies. And Sierra Forest AP and Granite Rapids AP, the higher core count models, also share the same I/O dies as the other models, and they're going to use the same larger AP socket. And I've also been told, I guess I mixed this up, that the DDR5 memory controllers are actually on the compute tile. So let me put an updated diagram on screen here briefly. Now, let's start with Granite Rapids. Overall, this doesn't look much different than what I leaked a couple weeks ago, but note that I put a bit more detail in the I/O dies, and that just because they're I/O dies doesn't mean you should assume, doesn't mean that I should have assumed that that's where the memory controllers are. There's actually 4 DDR5 controllers in each of the compute tiles, and then that means that for workstation, they plan to possibly use 2 compute tiles and then disable 2 memory channels per those tiles. And then for the SP model, there will just be 8 memory channels, and then for the AP model, 12. And these I/O dies are shared with Sierra Forest, which let me put this on screen. This is Sierra Forest AP. You see the main model, this key customer is going to buy, will have just one of these 144 core tiles, 2 I/O dies, and then the AP model uses 2 of the same core tiles that this customer wants. And to make it work in a 12-channel platform, they're just going to disable 2 memory channels per core tile for the Sierra Forest AP model. And so, yeah, I mean, this is what we're looking at now. It may seem wasteful that Intel isn't designing a special higher core count Sierra Forest tile that has, I don't know, like 6 memory channels on it or something. But this is what they've got to do. This is how they're going to make it work because they cannot afford to not launch this product on time for this customer. That 144 core model has to come out on time, and frankly, everything else can be thrown to the waysides after it. Does that mean the SRF-AP could be canceled then, like the other 512 and 344 core models? I guess it could be, but I would say that the fact that it doesn't use any unique tiles anymore makes it very unlikely they're going to cancel the 288 core design as well. It's just probably going to come out later. The only other thing you should worry about is potentially GNR-SP could be downgraded to 80 cores, which means the workstation model might be 80 cores instead of 86 cores, though I don't know how much people would actually care about that. And Granite Rapids may go down to 120 cores, and this may be just accounting for worse yields on Intel 3. Now, that wouldn't mean horrible yields. You know, they'd be disabling like, I don't know, like 10% of the tile. But, you know, this is all pointing to the same thing. They're not sure Intel 3 is not going to work well next year. And they're also not sure that this thing won't be able to come out on time, but they're starting to make little cuts on the edges to ensure that nothing gets delayed anymore, because they realize it's the delays that are mostly killing them. And in fact, I think that's why the higher core count models of Meteor Lake, at least as far as I've been told, are canceled, much to the dismay of gamers. From what I'm hearing, yes, 6+8 laptop Meteor Lake is coming out late this year, but from what I'm hearing, they've axed the higher core count follow-up for desktop, and if they launch Meteor Lake to desktop early next year, it's just going to be like a 6+8 i5 or i7, unfortunately. But it's for the same reason they would have canceled the other Sierra Forest models, people. They would have canceled these other Meteor Lake models because it's laptop they need to stay competitive in first before desktop. And so if any other design resources that were going towards making a higher core count desktop Meteor Lake could pull away from the laptop one and delay the laptop release, that would be unacceptable to Intel. They need to keep laptop market share above, I don't know, 70% is what they're thinking, or at least above 65%. And so they're going to axe the desktop models and just refresh Raptor Lake, it sounds like, for that. It's the same reason Intel is canceling some Meteor Lake gaming products, that they are canceling some higher core count Sierra Forest products. And I actually want to talk about this further, the mistakes in Intel design and the type of behavior you can expect out of the company over the coming years. But first, an ad from a sponsor. Jessie here is very young. She can eat just about anything. Kibble, bones, chicken, whole sticks of butter, parts of my laptop charger, and she just shrugs it off. That's really not me. 10 years ago, I could eat chocolate cake and bacon for breakfast and feel fantastic throughout the day. But the older I get, the more my body reminds me I'm getting older every year. And if I eat too much sugar or carbs or really a bunch of things these days, I just feel terrible. And so if you're somebody like me who doesn't want to feel unhealthy, but wants to eat something that tastes like the cereal you used to eat as a kid, then you should consider Magic Spoon. This piece of content is sponsored by Magic Spoon, a reimagining of cereal that is high in protein, gluten-free, grain-free, and contains no cane sugars, corn syrup, sugar alcohols, or artificial sweeteners. And yet, it really does taste great. I tried it. I have a variety pack, and I especially liked the frosted flavor. But they also have cocoa, fruity, and peanut butter. And if you're interested in this product and you want to help out Moore's Law is Dead, because this really does help the channel, scan the QR code on screen or go to the link in the description and use offer code BROKENSILICON to get $5 off a Magic Spoon variety pack. I tried it. It really does taste great, and it helps the channel if you have cereal like you used to have without feeling all worn out. Try Magic Spoon today. Alright, so in the first part of the video, I talked about cuts Intel was making to Sierra Forest out of necessity to keep their core customers happy, and the main way you keep a customer happy is actually launching the products you need to on time. It's the same reason I believe they are canceling multiple models of Meteor Lake. They know the laptop one is what matters for market share, for their money, and if that got delayed to next year, after Strix came out, it would be unacceptable. So screw the desktop one. They got to make sure this keeps going. And this is something that I think we're just going to keep seeing out of Intel moving forward, that they're actually going to cancel some of their more ambitious projects and just finally accept that AMD is in the lead in multiple segments to make sure that their main segments actually launch on time. They can't keep wasting so much money designing all of these different dies that aren't reused everywhere. And I actually want to put a chart on screen to demonstrate like the issue, the inefficiency inside of Intel right now and why this has to change. But before I do, I want to be clear about a few things that will be on the chart. I'm going to focus on just 4 AMD dies, 2 of their I/O dies and 2 of their chiplet dies that they can use to make a ton of different products, and then compare that to the amount of dies Intel has to make to compete in those segments against AMD. I'm not doing all of the dies AMD makes or all of the dies Intel makes. If I were to do that, I'd have to show like dozens of different mobility products out of these companies. And if I started showing them, it'd be like, well, do I show the main Phoenix die or that little Phoenix that I leaked last year? Because that comes out later this year. But that means that's coming out next to Meteor Lake. So then do I have to show all of the dies that go into Meteor Lake? Then do I have to show Strix? We're going to limit it to just 4 AMD dies and what Intel has to launch to compete with them. And I'm not going to focus on the Vcache ones. I'm not going to focus on like Sapphire Rapids HBM, just these core models. But anyways, let me put this on screen. So we have 4 AMD tiles or chiplets. You have the Zen 4 8-core CCD, the Zen 4C 16-core, that's one that will be used in Bergamo. And then you have the EPYC IO die and the Ryzen Zen 4 IO die. Now remember, the IO die in Raphael on AM5 right now, that's the same one that's going to be used in Dragon Range. And in fact, the EPYC IO die used for Genoa, same one used in Genoa-X, same one used in Bergamo, and a disabled version of it, same one that will be used in Sienna. So everything I'm showing AMD competing with here is just from these 4 dies. And one more caveat here before we get into it as well. With Raptor Lake, technically right now, they're pretty much, I believe, only using the 8+16 die, but they did design an 8+8 die and a 4+0 die. The only reason they aren't manufacturing these right now is because they have an oversupply of Alder Lake, which they've confirmed on their earnings that they have excess Intel 7 inventory. That's what they're talking about. So in other words, they still had to design 2 other dies for the i3 and lower i5 class that they're using right now. And if they had sold all of Alder Lake, they still would have been launching these. And that cost millions of dollars to hard design all of these. In fact, even Sapphire Rapids, unlike with like EPYC Naples with Zen 1, they actually still use a mirror design. 2 different tiles had to be designed for Sapphire Rapids. But yeah, let's look at this here. So I color-coded these, and you can see how just 4 of these AMD dies are able to compete in all of this. Enthusiast Desktop, they can use 1 of the Ryzen IO dies, 2 of the Zen 4 8 cores for that, and then Intel, well, for the Raptor Lake i7-99, they have 1 die. But then the second you go down to where AMD is just using 8 cores, AMD, again, didn't have to design anything new. They just used 1 less chiplet, saved a ton of money. Already, Intel's starting to work into a smaller die for the i5. Then we go down again, and guess what? Again, they had to design an i3 die that they're using. AMD, if they ever want to launch like a single quad core, they don't need to. They can just use the bad yields of Zen 4 with the same IO die. And it keeps going on and on. And Genoa, look at this. Intel had to design 2 Sapphire Rapids tiles to compete in general purpose server. AMD, 1 IO die, and they're still just using the same chiplets we've kept mentioning. Bergamo, same IO die as Genoa. Now they have a Zen 4C chiplet. Same with Sienna. Threadripper, Intel, for their lower core count server stuff and workstation, had to design a monolithic 24-core Fishhawk Falls. Again, we're still talking about the same EPYC IO die, the same chiplets, even going into Dragon Range. If they have excess supply or something in server, like they lose a contract, guess what? They can shift all that to Dragon Range. I guess Intel can use some of the stuff in desktop, but if desktop isn't selling well and server isn't selling well, they just have a bunch of extra stuff. And this just goes to show you, like, Intel doesn't even have an answer to Bergamo until Sierra Forest launches. So not only is Intel having to use 50% more dies in this comparison to compete with these 4 AMD dies, they don't even really have an answer to one of them because of how much less modular and reusable their dies are together in combination. And look, when Intel's revenue was up, when they still owned most of the market share in server, laptop, desktop, and HEDT, even after Zen 1 and Zen Plus had launched, Intel could afford to act this way, but they probably never should have been, because it doesn't matter how you dice it. Even if you can afford to spend on all of these different little tiles, all of these different dies that are monolithic, the fact of the matter is your design teams are still getting stretched thinner than they need to have been. If they would have just designed a Sapphire Rapids that used one tile 4 times like Zen 1 Epic did, then maybe they would have had less bugs. Maybe their design team would have been spread less thin. Even if on paper your design team is big enough to do this, that's not a good argument. You could have still got it out even faster than otherwise, even if you had more people. Good, you have more people. That means you should have less delays than AMD. But instead, with how inefficient Intel was running how they designed all of their architectures, they kept having delays. Well, AMD kept launching products on time. And notice that I didn't even get into things like MI300, which all AMD had to do for this was design 2 base 6nm tiles that are mirrored. From what I've been told recently, actually, MI300's 6nm base tile can use 3 Zen 4 CCDs. That's where that 9 compute thing comes from. They have 2 XCDs that they designed on each of those 6nm tiles, and then the 24 cores of Zen 4. One of those base tiles can support 3 of those Zen 4 CCDs. That's it. They did design 2 new tiles for MI300 that is set to blow Ponte Vecchio out of the water. And look at all these tiles on Ponte Vecchio. That's why it didn't launch before MI300. And because it didn't, because it was overly complex and inefficiently designed, it's not going to be competitive. And yeah, so that's how I want to close this video. I didn't just want to leak some updates to Sierra Forest and Granite Rapids that unfortunately show a lowering of core counts drastically in the case of Sierra Forest, but I wanted to explain why this is happening, why Intel would make such drastic cuts. It's because they finally accepted delays more so than the top level of performance. That's what's really killing them, and they can't keep expecting their design teams to design 10 versions of a product, throw that out there, and have none of them get delayed. Which one actually needs to launch on time? Well, it's the Sierra Forest model for that key customer. Which Meteor Lake model needs to launch on time? Laptop. Can't lose laptop performance anymore. And I would expect we're going to keep seeing this moving forward. Like, I recently leaked that Arrow Lake was looking to maybe have a 40-core model, but now has been reduced to, I believe it's still just 24 cores total. That's probably because they realized the model they need to win for gaming doesn't need those extra cores. So this is what they're going to focus on. One model that works well, not a bunch of models where half of them don't really matter. And I think you can expect this out of Intel in the future. In fact, when I look at sales or lack of sales for some of their products, I think you've got to ask yourself, how many dies are they really going to be designing for those products on the roadmap moving forward? I would expect a lot of changes to Intel's roadmaps this year as they finally accept reality and nerf their lineups. And yeah, you can expect a lot more updates coming out of this channel regarding Intel's upcoming products and regarding AMD's upcoming products. I'm going to be honest here when it comes to Sierra Forest. When I heard that Sierra Forest was looking to have hundreds of cores, and, you know, I always took that to mean 400 to 800 cores was what actually I did hear that was the initial target. I was excited. I was like, okay, 400, 600 or something, little cores. You know, this is going to be something that can go head-to-head with Bergamo. Bergamo has 256 threads, and they're all big cores. But, hey, you know, who knows? Maybe 500 little cores can beat that. When I hear 288 little cores, all I can say is that Intel 3 process better be good, because I almost wonder if it can beat Bergamo at this point, let alone Zen 5C coming out next year. And I just think it's going to be not just a rough 2023 for Intel, but everything I'm hearing, these cuts of necessity, well, they're cuts of necessity. I don't think they're going to be cuts that make it so that they actually have top performance anymore. But maybe accepting that reality that you're not on top anymore is what Intel needs to do to survive the next few years. But yeah, so you can expect Zen 5 leaks coming soon, but I need to make sure I dot some I's on that, because it doesn't seem to be exactly what some people have been expecting. And well, yeah, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please like it, subscribe, share, ring that bell button so you actually get the notifications. Put comments below. What do you think about this new information? And additionally, consider supporting Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. A new die shrink came out today just for patrons. You can get access to the Discord. You submit reader mails for upcoming episodes of Broken Silicon and Die Shrink. You can ask questions. You can talk to me, talk to other fans. All of those resources are there for those that have the extra $2 or $4 a month. But for everybody else, no matter what, thank you for watching.